They've got a bit of extra juice, a bit of extra sauce, a bit of mojo. Hi there, and welcome to Phase Drive Vlogs. Today we're looking at some really interesting IR cabs, impulse response cabs from Dr Bonkers. So just before we start, a quick reminder, if you haven't already, then please consider subscribing down the bottom. We release stuff every week on music production, video production, photography, all sorts of interesting stuff. So please subscribe and get those weekly updates. So we've been very kindly sent some cab IRs by Dr Bonkers Soundlab. So big thanks to Mike and Dr Bonkers for doing that. So we thought we'd put them through their paces and also compare them against our stock Celestion cabs. So we've chosen cabs that we can replicate with Celestion speakers, so they're all Celestion based cabs. But let's have a quick look at what we're looking at. So we're basically looking at three. There's a 1x12, and I'm more of a kind of open 1x12, 2x12 cab person. So I prefer those, but we've got two closed back 2x12s as well. So this first one, so the first thing to say about Dr Bonkers is they call their range the Oddity, and they're a bit unusual. They're not kind of what I call your stock cabs, and they've got a few different things about them. First up is that amongst the various selections of IRs, they go right up to 96 kilohertz 32-bit. Amongst the various selections, there are the option to have just the mic input, and I think these are all created in a room which is designed for cab IR recording. So they have the option of having the influence of the power amp that's driving the speakers either in or out of the IR. So they presumably create an IR for the power amp. I'm not sure how you do that, but there you go. And then they subtract it from the pure mic IR, and then they give the option of having the IR with the influence of the power amp in, which tends to make it warmer and thicker, and I quite like that. So I think that's quite a good thing. The other thing they do, these things, which are Crown, or as it's now owned by AKG, Crown PZM boundary layer microphones attached to the cab, and this is to get the kind of low end cab thump and rumble. And again, that seems to work really well. It gives, again, a lot more kind of bottom end thump. So if you're doing sort of, you're chugging along, that might actually be preferable. So we'll have a look at those in a moment. But I think that's quite an interesting idea, and I quite like the fact that they're taking a slightly different slant on traditional IRs. So for every cab, we've matched it with our standard Celestion cab IR, and we've got three cabs. So looking at this, what's called a Dirty Shirley, it's based on a Friedman application 1x12, so 1x12, sorry, with a Celestion G1265 Creambk. The two 4x12s are this one, which is based on a year 2000 Marshall 4x12 for the JCM 900 lead. That's got four Celestion G12 M20 Greenbacks in it, so we've got Celestion equivalent for that. And lastly, we've got this one, which is 2008 Marshall amp 1960B 300 watt cabinet with three G12 T75 speakers, and again we've got the Celestion equivalent. So first part of this, we're going to look at what's called the Dirty Shirley. It's a great name for a cabinet, and then we'll have a look at the 4x12s. So let's start off with our 4x12s. So first up, as an amp, we're using the wonderful Nembrini MRH 810 V2 amp, which obviously is a Marshall sim. I'm not a Marshall man, generally Fender man, but I do love this amp. It's it's a really good sounding piece of kit. So hats off to Nembrini for that. So we're using that as our amp. We've got 3 settings. We've got a clean setting, a crunchy setting, and a overdrive setting. So we'll see what it sounds like with all of those. We've got 4 cabs. We've got the standard mic cab with the power amp out. We've got the PZM cab with those boundary layer mics, and we've got a cab with the power amp in. We've tried to, they don't do identical mic sets for each. The power amp one's a single mic, so we've used a single mic for the power amp cab and a combo of D6 and U97 for the mic only and PZM. But you should get a good idea, fairly good idea of what they sound like. And then for the Celestion, it's just the Celestion 1x12 equivalent. So let's see how they sound. So first up, clean sound, and we're running through the 1x12 with the D6 and U97. Fine. So the Celestion equivalent, let's just take it out. Celestion equivalent, a bit like this. So a little bit kind of fuller and rounder. The Dr Bonkers cab is, I find, a bit more wiry. It's not a bad thing, you know. Sometimes you want something a bit thinner, a bit more wiry. But yeah, both nice sounding. Let's just go to the PZM cab. And back to the Celestion. Yeah, you can definitely hear the bass thump on that PZM cab. So those boundary mics are making a lot of difference in kind of emphasising the bottom end, which I really like. So let's have a look at the good old. So this is basically a U97 with the power amp IR left in. So a lot warmer, a lot thicker, and I think when we get the drive tones on, that comes into its own. If you want that kind of Billy Gibbons-esque sort of ZZ Top creamy sort of tone, then that's a really good cab for that. And likewise, when you get heavier, the PZM gives you that bottom end thump, which is great for chugging or sort of really sort of percussive rhythmic stuff on the lower strings particularly. So let's switch it up a bit, and let's just see what the various cabs sound like. So I'm just going to select through the cabs, starting with the mic. What I'll go through is to start with the mic only, MicDi only, the PZM power amp, and then the Celestion. Interesting. I'm really starting to fall in love with the PZM and the power amp versions. Let's just turn it up a notch and see if and see what they sound like with a bit of creamy distortions. That's pretty tasty. I think the PZM is growing on me. Especially for that sort of percussive work where you want a bit more thump and bottom end. Yeah, interesting. I think my overall thoughts is that the Celestion is got the kind of nice clarity to it, nice balance, and so have the equivalent Dr Bonkers MicDi mic only versions. But the PZM and the power amp versions have got something else. They've got a bit of extra juice, a bit of extra sauce, a bit of mojo. I was experimenting with these and pre-testing some of these sounds before I actually sort of recorded this project. The PZM and the power amp versions, I couldn't put them down. I couldn't stop playing them, especially for that sort of ZZ Top style, kind of grungy sort of rock sound. And that's quite rare in a piece of software to get that kind of feel. And it also kind of felt a bit like, you're sitting in a music shop and you get that thing where you pick up that piece of gear and it just kind of feels good. It just kind of falls into your hand. The sound is good and it makes you play better. And you just feel, makes you feel great. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's had that in a music shop. And sometimes you just kind of feel a bit guilty, as you do when you're sitting in a music shop and you've been testing stuff out and haven't bought anything, they're kind of asking you how much you like it. And I got a bit of that even going on because I was just having so much fun. So that's quite an achievement in a cab IR. And certainly they'll be forming part of my sort of arsenal. The Celestions are still great, but these have got a little bit of individuality, which I think is really precious. I think that's something that we should, all manufacturers should aspire to. And yeah, just if they can give you that sitting in your room jamming with a real amp, or kind of sitting in a music shop having a whale of a time sort of feeling, then they're doing something right. And Dr Bonkers go to a lot of trouble to make these sound good, and it shows. Shows that the effort is worthwhile. So that's the Dirty Shirley, which is a great name for a cab. Part of the reason I'm going to include it in my collection because I love the name and I love the cab. So in part 2, we'll have a look at the 4x12s and see how they fare. So we've taken a look at the 1x12 cab. So let's have a look at a couple of 4x12 cabs. So we're looking at the Dr Bonkers version and then the Celestion equivalent, basically. So first up is the JMT75, which has basically got G12T75 speakers in it. So we've got the equivalent Celestion cab, and we're going to go straight into rock mode with a bit of crunch. Interesting. Let's just ramp it up a bit to full on filth. Nice. Again, very different. I mean, I think the Celestion sounds a bit more kind of creamy and sort of, you know, that kind of closed in sort of 4x12 sound. The Dr Bonkers has got a bit more kind of edge and a bit more kind of sort of, it's got that kind of brittle top end of the G12, what are they called? The G12T75 seems to have. So yeah, I mean, again, no great preference, but if I was using the PZM and Power Amp versions, which I've tried out, I didn't think it was a fair test to compare them directly. But again, they have got that extra kind of, you know, creaminess, bottom end thump, and a bit of mojo, which you know, I think will kind of brings your guitar playing to life a bit. And so, you know, if I was forced, I would probably pick those versions over the Celestions. And that idea of doing the Power Amp and PZM mics is a really good one. It gives you something with a bit more kind of, yeah, bottom end and sort of depth and breadth if you want it. So that's the first set. Let's go to the second set. Open those two up. So this time it's Dr Bonkers JMGB, which is a Celestion G12 Heritage Greenback, I think, from memory. Again, we're going to start with some crunch and then see how I get on. Interesting. Again, very different characters. I like both of them. Difficult to pick between those two. I like the greenback character. I mean, it's a bit more kind of warm and sort of meaty than the G12 75. So yeah, yeah, like them. But again, having played with the PZM and Power Amp versions, they are pretty nice. And if you want something extra, you know, a bit of extra body, warmth, thump, there's certainly options that are worth considering. Also, the Power Amp versions tend to come in a little bit louder, so that may be of use. But yeah, Dr Bonkers, some very, very interesting cabs, and not particularly expensive. I think they're about $16, $17, and sometimes on sale for about $9 or $10. So yeah, very good. I'm very impressed. And yeah, it's nice to see smaller producers and you know, software designers coming up with some of this stuff, and it's also nice to see something different in the IR world, and sort of pushing that forward, because you know, the further it develops, the more us guitarists benefit. So yeah, if you haven't already and you're after some interesting and different cab IRs with some very useful options, then check them out. they'll be certainly be added to my collection. So there we go. So that's all for this episode. And coming up, we've got plenty more software reviews. We've got some more new stuff from Fuse Audio Labs and some possible some Nombrini stuff coming up. So keep an eye on the channel and see what comes up. Catch you on the next one, and that's it. Start again. Just one cam might do it too, because it's probably going to be enough.